Yeah.
Let me just say a few words. Good morning, everyone. Good morning.
Morning.
Good
Uh,
morning, sir.
yeah, uh,
Morning.
we have few more friends to join now, and uh, today being, I think third, I think today being the fourth round of interaction, and online wise, it would be, I think the second online interaction. And this kind of online interaction was it started since December 2002, oh sorry, December 2020, with the idea of upgrading the skills of our journalists in Manipur, especially in the field of reporting environment and climate change issues. And fortunately, the Department of Environment in the state uh, consider media as a stakeholder in taking up the climate change issues in Manipur. So as part of it, they have started this state level media fellowship on climate change reporting since 2018-19 onwards. And in the first round of media fellowship program of the Director of Environment, they have given media awards to 6 journalists in the state. And now this time in the second round, they're giving media awards to 13 journalists, including those in hills as well. And besides this, the media working group on climate change, it's a group of media persons, and in collaboration with the Director of Environment, we started this kind of initiative uh, of organizing interaction program and how to develop the skills among the journalists to disseminate the climate change issue and reporting, especially in the reporting area. So this time, I think it was on 25th of June, we have a similar online interaction wherein the Nitin Sethi, the Delhi-based journalist, uh, make a presentation, and we have a nice time interacting about the issue. And at that point of time, uh, only the media fellows, I mean, the 13 media fellows uh, were present. But this time again, this second round, we have a few more journalists who are not the media fellow recipient, but in fact, they are the working journalists presently reporting from different parts of the state, as well as from the state capital. And so this time we have 2 journalists from Thobal district, 2 journalists from Jiribam, which includes the advisor of all Jiribam working journalists body, and 2 new faces from Churachandpur district, where more than 5 daily news published in different dialect and languages. And interestingly, one more new face from Ukhrul is supposed to join. I think he will be joining soon. And then similarly, one more friend from Tamenglong and Senapati and Imphal, including one vernacular called Sana Lepak is also joining. I think he's already joined now. So as uh, uh, I mean, like being the coordinator of this kind of initiative to upgrade the skill of our journalists here, uh, we have been requesting experts, I mean, the experts from the state and experts from the outside the state to share and give some new ideas on developing the skills of our journalists in taking up this kind of issue. So this time we're inviting Richard Mahapatra. He's the managing editor of a popular New Delhi-based fortnightly called Down to Earth. And as I have already shared the details about Richard and what he has done in his past in connection with the reporting in environment and development activities. So let's listen to our special, what do you say, the speaker, Richard Mahapatra from Delhi. Richard, kindly start.
Thank you, Sabhapati. Thank you very much for inviting me and to share our experience. And let me start with a brief introduction to the magazine. I think that's where we all want to know about Down to Earth, about what it does, what kind of journalism it does. Down to Earth started publishing from 1992. So we are going to come, we are on the 30th year of uh, publish, publishing, and this is still considered to be the only magazine in Asia focused on development and environment. And beside that, Down to Earth has its own website, which is independent of it, and you must have seen it. Then we come out with 2 annual publication, very premier publication. It's called the State of the India's Environment print every 1st of January. And there is another State of India's Environment in figures. That's completely data-driven journalism product that released on the Environment Day. And many of might have joined us also in the release. I'm sure about that. But what does this magazine do? And I can see my former colleagues like Sobhapati, then the Salam, and all these things. We used to work for a magazine called Northeast Sun. And after that, I joined here. Down to Earth is a magazine, basically, to define it, it's not a narrow magazine on development and environment. It reports everything, crime to politics to elections to everything, but from the 2 lenses, environment and development. So we reported on insurgency in Kashmir, but we put in the politics of environment and development into it. And in fact, that's one rare occasion that the magazine was invited to address the parliament on our cover story on Kashmir, how to use the natural resources to bring in economic development and, then the peace. And we have reported about northeastern states a lot, like Nitin, you heard of him sometime back, he used to work here. But to put it in one line to define the magazine actually deploys the rigor of academic research, but in popular format. So we are a magazine which does research, heavy research, but tell, like all of us, in interesting stories. Then the second aspect about this magazine, because this is fairly means Indian readers as well as outside readers. And as I told you, this magazine has been writing about environment and development for 30 years. So it has its own profile. We connect from local to global because there is nothing called local beat or a global beat when you write about environment. Political map, the boundaries, everything we can do that at our level, but environment never respects that thing. So this magazine is always, if you look at it, make that connects between the local to the global. It's basically tell local stories in a global perspective. It informs the global audience on the local things, and it informs the local about the global impact on their life. So that's all about the magazine. And how we do that, I think, like all of us journalists, I think Down to Earth is completely manned by or managed by journalists. And this is one magazine which keeps on traveling, spends the maximum on news gathering. More than 40% of the budget is spent on news gathering. And why I'm saying you this basically that there is no substitute to going to places and reporting. And I'll come to that, why it's actually an advantage for you all who are reporting from this. So this is all about that magazine. Now coming to climate change and how to report about it. Let me start with few things that we all know it, but we need to reiterate. Climate change is the biggest story of our time, bigger than the once in a century pandemic that we all are reporting now. Climate change is actually the biggest story of our time, and we are the generations that are going to report it. We are reporting it. Second, this is the most globalized local story to be told. Anything you report on climate change is the most local stories, but it's the most globalized thing also. You know, the whole world gather once in a year somewhere and they speak about climate change. All the heads of state come together. The world is coming together on how to fight climate change. Countries are fighting with each other. It's a very global issue, very much hot issue, as hot as pandemic. But it's also a very local story. Just imagine, we all are reporting from a state called Manipur, from a district called Churachandpur, or I may be going to Odisha, reporting from a district called Balangir. You might not have heard about the name, but I am doing a story on climate change. And that's the actually connect. And in a globalized way, anyway, there is nothing called local and there is nothing called global. Every issue, every local story is a global story, and every global development has a local impact. Now coming to climate change. I'm just putting few very basic things because sometimes the basics we need to reiterate ourselves. A journalist, because we are paid to tell the story and to inform, so it's better to reiterate. What is climate change? I think climate change is not a rocket science to understand. Climate change is not weather, and climate change is something as big as the atmosphere. So basically, climate, as the textbook defines, it's a long-term weather pattern. And the climate doesn't stop at the political boundary. The climate of Pakistan doesn't stop at the LOC. The climate of China doesn't stop at LAC. It's the only thing that actually interacts above us, irrespective of things. So scientifically, climate is a planetary level. जो बोलते हैं ना पूरा सारा वर्ल्ड का वो एक ही चीज है जो ऊपर घूमता रहता है. जब हम एरोप्लेन में फ्लाई करते हैं तो वो उनका टेरिटरी है, उसी में सब कुछ होता है. Now, how does it impact? It is as simple as that. If we are breathing, the climate change is going to impact us because you are breathing in the atmosphere. If you are surviving on agriculture, if you are dependent on any natural resources, climate change will impact you. As simple as that. For example, agriculture. Manipur is majorly agrarian state, everybody knows. But it also rain-fed. It depends on the rain. That's how the local ecology and local economy has evolved. Manipur is agrarian not for the sake of that the farmers or people wanted to do farming. It's basically the ecology and the climate was like that, so you actually evolved out of it. So 12,000 to 15,000 years ago, when we started settling down and started taking up organized agriculture, the climate was main thing which dictated. So that's all about climate change. Now come to the issue. Climate change, as I told you, it's the most localized but globalized. Just look at it. You know, few countries during the industrial revolution started emitting carbon dioxide. And when we talk about climate change, let me clear it. We talk about the human induced factor to the climate change. जो नेचुरली क्लाइमेट चेंज होता है प्लानेट की अपना लाइफ में, अपने हमने सब सुना है, वो उसकी बात हम नहीं करते हैं अभी। जब भी क्लाइमेट चेंज बोलते हैं तो कि इस पे ह्यूमन का क्या रोल रहा है, उसी का ही हम बातचीत करते हैं। तो ह्यूमन कैसे किया था? बेसिकली कार्बन एमिशन हुआ, कार्बन एमिशन ज्यादा हो जाने से प्लानेट की जो अपना जो कैपेसिटी था उससे ऊपर हो गया, वो गर्म होने लगा है, वार्मिंग। और सबको पता होता है कि इट इज एज सिंपल एज दैट कि जब गर्मी ज्यादा होता है तो एटमॉस्फेयर व्हेन इट वार्म्स मोर और हीट अप, देन द एयर travels everywhere. That is science. And now let me tell you, if this air moves in a warming world, what happens? Arctic is warming and Manipur is paying a price in terms of extreme weather events. Manipur's own climate change plan will tell you that, inform you that what would be the impact on Manipur, and it shows that the extreme weather events will go up, extreme rainy day will go up. And that's an impact. Just imagine it's happening. Arctic is warming, and that's why it's disrupting everything. And a farmer from Manipur is actually paying the price. So as I told you, few countries during the industrial revolution and the first one to industrialize started emitting carbon dioxide, and the carbon dioxide will remain in the atmosphere for at least 250 years. So the 250 years what was emitted is now warming up more and more. But there are developing countries also like India, and all these countries also need to emit. We have a right to emit because you have to develop. So we'll also add on to it. So America emitting more, developed countries emitting more, warming the atmosphere, and a farmer in Manipur paying the price now. So it's a very global planetary problem, but climate change, remember, its impact is felt by the at very local level. And those who depend more on environment or natural resources are impacted more. So a farmer is more impacted by climate change. Somebody who is dependent on rain is more impacted. Somebody who is dependent on forest will be more impacted by the climate change. Now the second part. Climate change is not just ecological. Climate change is a political issue. Climate change is an economical issue. And climate change is also a social issue. Let me start with the social. You know, climate change has a biases, very strong biases, like all of us. You know, it impacts the poorest the most. And why is that? You know, an American might be hit by 20 hurricanes a year, but at the end of the year, he must have successfully moved out of it. But just imagine a poor farmer in an Indian state, in a poor district, impacted by erratic rainfall. सूखा हो गया, extreme बारिश आ गया, मेरा खेती खराब हो गया, and I am one of the poorest in the India. यही हो रहा है. तो क्लाइमेट चेंज का जो ऑलवेज जब भी हम रिपोर्टिंग करते हैं कि देखते हैं कि इसका विक्टिम कौन है, उसका विक्टिम वही होते हैं जो पुअरेस्ट होता है सोसाइटी. और इन इंडियन वी नो देयर आर पुअर आल्सो, देयर आर कास्ट बेस्ड disadvantaged marginalized people also. Tribals are marginalized peoples and tribals depend more on it. So एक climate change का जो sociology part भी सबसे बड़ा impact जो होता है वही होता है कि the poorest and the marginalized people are impacted the most. That's why I say that climate change is class and caste biases. Second, what happens if climate change impacts the poorest? If you are poor and you are year after year you are being impacted or battered by climate change, your income comes down. And you can see it in the Manipur climate change action plan and the forecast for Manipur. And you can see it across the world. Climate change is the biggest driver of poverty now. And I'll come to it why I'm telling you beginning means why all these things are important. So last year, the World Climate Report came and the World Migration Report came. What it showed, first time in the history of the world, natural disasters are impacting or displacing more people than war and conflicts. In any disturbed area, in conflict-ridden areas, we knew that the war and battle or the conflicts, insurgencies, all actually displaced more people. But first time the world is witnessing more people being displaced by natural disasters. And that's another point. Now the third point. Let's come to the why Manipur is important. I always believe that reporting from Northeast and for that matter from the state like Manipur, that's actually the real theater of reporting climate change. And remember, the climate change story is not to be told by attending conferences. The best climate stories are told from the field where you can tell the story of climate change through a farmer, through a local persons. And we'll come to that. Let me explain Himalaya. Manipur is nestled. Indian Northeast is basically the Himalayan area. And Himalaya is the hotspot of climate change. First, when you compare Himalayan area and you compare the other geography, Himalayan areas are warming 3 times faster than the land area. 3 times faster. What does it mean? We have all our fresh waters and everything, the glaciers, the snow and everything is there. That's where the country's actually watershed is there, the source of water, and being stored or frozen to be released sustained way. Now that's warming faster. And the whole ecology started from this. The whole economy actually and our life evolved according to that. Warming 3 times faster means, remember, we all have huge problem, extreme weather events, extreme rainfall events. That's already thing. Now the second, the monsoon is changing because the world wind pattern is changing globally. As I told you, Arctic is warming, Antarctica is warming. So it's changing the wind pattern. The wind pattern changing means your monsoon is also changing. Indian subcontinent is also warming, so it's also changing. So what it means, northeastern, the Himalayas are the actually give us rain to everybody. You know, the monsoon comes there, heat it there, it rains, then comes back and all this thing. That's also changing. Can I just slip out a piece of information which is unsettles all of us? This probably going to be the 30th consecutive year the Indian Northeast region will having a abnormal monsoon, below normal monsoon. 30th consecutive year. A state like Nagaland might be having more than that. Look at the IMD now. Manipur is glaring. Pre-monsoon shower down by 60%. Monsoon shower deficit continuously. But you have extreme weather events also. It's raining like the day it rains, it pours. That's precisely the climate change. At the end of the year, you might have a very cumulatively good monsoon, but it's not. How much you get at the end of the year, it doesn't count. How it moves and where it goes is this. So I'm just telling you, it's 30 years. Indian Northeast region, including Manipur, is showing troubling signs of climate change impact. What does it mean? You know, snows are melting, so it's fundamentally changing the water courses. You are getting more dry days, Manipur. Just refer to your things. climate change forecast and your rain data, you have less number of rainy days, but you have higher number of extreme rainy days. So it means floods. Since how many years Manipur is having floods? The migration between the hills and the plain. What's happening? Why is that happening? Another story. If you look at it, Manipur, we all know that in the Himalayas, water springs are drying up. This is, you all can refer to the Niti Aayog's fantastic work on the state of springs in the Himalaya and look at Manipur. How the springs, which are basically the contributor to rivers, and rivers then tributaries, then the rivers, then those are drying up. So I'm no more getting my water supply at the top of the hills, which I used to. And it's collapsing the fundamental of living, that is availability of water. That story, that's another story. Now the third part, why my things are, my normal agriculture is not happening. Again, I'm coming back to Manipur's own assessment. It's saying that there will be a fundamental shift in the way the state's economy has been, that is agrarian. So just position it. How to tell a story of climate, I think Manipur is. First of all, you are in the Himalayas, which is the hot spot of climate change impact, because it's the snow area, it's warming faster, and nobody knows without the snow, if it melts, how the planet will. We never saw the land area there. We are seeing it past time because the snow is melting. We never saw. We are the generation, we are looking at it. Then within that Himalaya, you have Manipur, which is a completely agriculture based state. And within that, Manipur is also rain-fed area. So if your rain cycle is disrupting, then it's fundamental. And that's where we have to explore the story. Now come to the next point. You know, when we do about how to go about a story on climate change, we always ask these questions. You know, climate change साइंस से बड़ा रॉकेट साइंस होगा, शायद इतने साइंटिस्ट काम करते हैं, आईपीसीसी रिपोर्ट सबको पता है, मणिपुर का अपना देख लीजिए जो स्टेट क्लाइमेट एक्शन प्लान हुआ होगा, कितने साइंटिस्ट काम करते हैं, साइंटिस्ट ने काम कर लिया. तो फिर इस बड़े स्टोरी को लोकल लेवल पे मैं एक गांव में जाके कैसे कैरेक्टर ढूंढूंगा. आई एम ए जर्नलिस्ट, मुझे स्टोरी बोलना है, मुझे स्टोरी लिखना है, मेरा कैरेक्टर्स कैसे ढूंढूंगा. साइंस तो पता लग है, मुझे साइंस पता लग गया, लेकिन मैं कैसे ढूंढूंगा और इसको लोकल लेवल से मैं कैसे स्टोरी करूंगा. कि दो चीज हो सकता है कि एक तो स्टोरी बाहर आएगा कि क्लाइमेट चेंज का इंपैक्ट कैसे चुराचांदपुर का एक गांव में एक फैमिली में इंपैक्ट आ रहा है. ये बड़ा पर्सनल इंपैक्ट होता है. somebody displaced by a flood and moving out to a new place is a personal story of climate change impact. लेकिन मैं बोलूंगा कैसे, ऐसे तो नहीं बोल सकता हूं ना. और सेकंड होता है कि चीज जो होता है कि दिस इज हाउ आल्सो यू मेक क्लाइमेट चेंज एज ए मेन स्ट्रीम पॉलिसी पे लाने के लिए भी ये होता है. कुछ मणिपुर का क्लाइमेट चेंज पॉलिसी क्यों है, कुछ तो रियलाइजेशन हुआ है कि क्लाइमेट चेंज इंपैक्ट सबको करेगा, इसलिए मणिपुर स्टेट भी किया है, सारे स्टेट ने किया है. लेकिन वो काम कर रहा है कि नहीं कर रहा है. तो जो एक इतना बड़ा ग्लोबल फेनोमेना को लोकल स्टोरी में कैसे कन्वर्ट करना है, लोकल लेवल से कैसे बोलना है. एंड विद दिस आई एम कमिंग टू आवर एक्सपीरियंस, जैसे हम कैसे बोलते हैं स्टोरी. मैं आपको बताता हूं कि अभी डाउन टू अर्थ में is doing a mega cover story on climate change impact on Northeast India. मैंने ऑलरेडी आपको हेडलाइन दे दिया वो कवर स्टोरी का. This is a part of the country for 30 years has not experienced a normal monsoon. Floods were there, but floods are going to new geography. There was no heat wave. You will agree with me in case of Manipur. When did you last actually reported somebody dying of a heat wave? But just imagine now, heat wave like condition. Floods are lengthening and water scarcity is too high. People talk about Cherrapunji, but the Northeast India has the highest desertification rate in the country. Manipur's 26% lands are degraded and it's increasing by 4% every year. These are the stories. So now come back. How to actually, when you do a story about climate change from a local things, what you do? So it's a very simple one. What we do is basically look at the what will be the impact of climate change on a region, global, country, then the state, then these things. You know, this is a small checklist and you have the data and you have everything scientific is available. A journalist, we are not supposed to now study it scientifically. Scientists have done their work. For example, in Manipur, just look at Manipur has two documents. One is that the climate change impact on the state, and second document is the how the climate change the state will fight. So action plan is one document and the impact. If you look at the impact, it's very clearly shows that you just make points. Impact will be rising temperature, one, increasing rainfall, third, land degradation, fourth, agriculture. What will be the impacts? Just points. Now, once you get those points, look at in your respective area and look for stories. Suppose I gave you a story. Has air conditioner sale has gone up in Imphal? In Manipur in general? That might be a normal salesman story, but that's a bigger climate change story which has to be told. Like I'll give you an example. We just raised these questions and look at Simla. We just did in the Hindi edition did a story how the Himalayan region, so many people never used to heat are going to adapt to heat. Just imagine Canada and US are also doing that. So it's happening in Manipur. So what would happen when temperature rises? You have your data. And Mr. Brajkumar Singh can always give you the data that how much temperature will rise in the state is given, but how it impacts the people is the story. Let's look at it first. Second is very troubling forecast, and it's already happening that the extreme weather, extreme high rainfall days will go up in Manipur, and we are already experiencing it. Look at those data. That's simple data. IMD will give you, even a look at their website will tell you how many days. For example, I can note you that in the last 3 months, Manipur had close to 25 extreme rain days. Even sometimes in one day rainfall, the whole week average happened in one day. Monitor that. That's one story. But what does it mean for a person? Which story you have to tell from the local? First, as I told you, Manipur is already degraded, losing forest. So climate change third impact always is not the caste and class. Also, climate change impact is much severe in places where the local environment is degraded. So on a piece of a degraded hill, if it's raining heavily, it will lead to flash flood. Definitely. You don't have forest. So how many floods Manipur is reporting? Definitely it's increasing number of floods. Now come to your agriculture. It's a rain-fed state and agriculture. What's happening? Which are the stories we have to look at it agriculture? First sign. Look for, signs of changes. My crop has changed. My plant's flowering season has changed. It might be just a romantic idea about my grandmother telling me कि ओ हमारे जमाने पे देखो ये तो उसी टाइम में फूलता था आजकल देखो तुम्हारा जल्दी flowering हो रहा है. That's troubling sign. That story need to be told. You know why? If mango doesn't flower on time, if it flower early, it's a loss of an economy. If it starts raining much before the June or whichever the onset day of the monsoon, how your sowing will disrupt. The moment you start sowing and the rain stops, you are a rain-fed state, then your loss is huge. That's an economic story. So make that sheet of paper with points, how climate change is going to impact my state and where. And the Manipur state has district-wide impacts also. They have listed, the scientists have listed. And now search for the storage. And that story has to be told from a village. So I come back to that, my point earlier said that we as environment journalists, more reporting from not from Delhi, but from a village in Manipur, are actually global reporter now. And our stories are powerful tools at the global fight. Why, when the developing countries are fighting against the developed countries, saying we must be compensated for the climate change because you people emitted and the impact is happening on. Remember, a household carbon emission in rural Manipur is zero. It's called survival emission. It's zero. There is no luxury emission. Just imagine, compare it with a person in America. 300 Manipuris annual emission is equal to per capita emission of an American. But due to that emission, 300 Manipuris are impacted badly without contributing anything. That's the story has to be told. And using this stories, actually, you are a global reporter reporting from a village and climate change and local stories. You are fueling to the politics of the climate change and giving evidences saying that I must be compensated. You are also putting pressure on the state governments saying that the flood, the valley, the migration to the valley, I think I'm not going into the details, but migration has definitely picked up and will pick up more. This is cutting across all the hilly areas in the world. That story needs to be told. So joining the dots, now come to the hard point of how to put this. You know, there is no formula in journalism, we all know that. But climate change has certain challenges reporting it. You know, data. Data, sometimes we can think, oh, data, you know, it gets key. Those are some difficult things. But remember, data tells its own story. For example, I am telling you, let's start. Many of you on face it, and barring few things, I think we all are below 40, 50 years. Isn't it? And we might have a reporting, you know, a journalist experience of 10 to 15 years. In our own generation, in 50 years, suppose, if I say a story that I have the current generations of 30 years age old in Manipur has not witnessed a normal season till now. Just imagine a new generation which has grown up with a disrupted season. It doesn't know what is normal because climate change has made everything abnormal. The textbook must have 9 seasons to do it, compare. There might be just 2 seasons now, practically. You know, these stories have to be told. So don't get threatened by this number. But second question is that the numbers are also useless the figures are useless if you don't give a human character to it. Otherwise, it's what is called that popularly cold statistics. How many people in a village becoming poor by just anecdotal reporting due to natural disaster is a climate change story. Human story has to be told. But the same way, if we use the data from the state government's action plan and forecast saying that the scientists are very clear that the frequency will go up because the frequency of natural disaster will go up, there will be an impact on people's economy, negative impact, and that's why you will also become poorer. Take up any village. At the third time, it's called the solution journalism now also, but what is the way out? It's not that the state must be doing something, people must be adapting to it. What are those? That again, people get scared. We as reporter and journalist, these are again scientific, America has to reduce emission and all this thing. Those are mitigation, long-term things. Forget about that now. Those politics, leave it to the America and Modi ji and Trump ji and Biden ji and everything. Let them fight. Adaptation is very local, how local people are doing it. And adaptation to climate change is nothing spectacularly different. If a Manipuri community used to survive on rain for centuries, on forest for centuries, and to harvest water for the scarcity, that's all about adaptation. So traditional practices, if somebody is doing, that's an adaptation story. We have been writing about it without the climate change, but this story has to be told in perspective of climate change. A glacier, artificial glacier maker in Ladakh is a climate change story, adaptation story. Precisely, a community preserving in Manipur its original biodiversity of agriculture is a climate adaptation story. A community conserving a spring on a hilltop is a climate change story now. So that's adaptation stories also have to be told from the climate change perspective. And as I told, don't get things, just put a slip of your, what are the impacts, what are the key numbers, and what are the IMD people are telling number wise. Give a monthly, yearly note and put it on your desktop, and then search for the story. So that story, now I'll end up before going for the introductions, if we have any questions, is that for a state like Manipur, which is also a Himalayan state, how it is impacting the overall politics and governance. That's another fascinating story without all of us realizing what's happening. You must have known about, must have reported about the Finance Commission, which gives allocate money from the central tax pool to the states. And when you come to the state has a finance commission which decides how much money from the state pool to go to the another form of government, that the local government, that the panchayats and the things. In that finance commission, you must have seen that Himalayan states always demand something higher. They demand more money from the central government, saying that we are protecting your water, we are protecting your forest, we are protecting the water source of the country, we must be rewarded. Just remember, ignore it as a business story or economic story that has a climate change aspect. All the Himalayan states are actually fighting bitterly for incentive to protect the forest they have been protecting. They are saying that I cannot take up development works on my hills. I cannot degrade forest because the rest of India want a good environment. Rest of India want water. I must be rewarded. That's a climate change story. If Manipur today degrades faster, a part of India is at stake, environmentally, ecologically, and economically. So that is all about how to put it in perspective, the story of climate change. And I want to demystify it again. Climate change is not a scientific subject. It's a day-to-day, very localized, personalized issue to be told. And that's the biggest story to be told. And we are the generations who are enduring a completely disrupted climate, are also journalists, have the best opportunity to report climate change. And any other things I can request you, CSE can help out with many understanding, with many materials there. You can always refer back and we'll give you the tools and all these things and how to report it more. And invite all of you to write for Down to Earth as well, and we can interact more. So I end it here, and if you have any questions and anything, clarifications, would love to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. But my request is before going to what you call the question and answer session, I would request you kindly highlight a bit on the reporters of down to earth, how they report about the region in a brief note.
Okay. As I told you, we do travel a lot. Northeast reporting, like you people heard about Nitin also, he reported us, many of you are writing also, how we go about the region. I just told you, we have been reporting on and off. Many stories we tell, but the mega cover story, I'll just tell you. The climate change impacts on northeastern regions, all the states. And I gave you the headlines. How you do about it? How down to earth reporters report about it? It is as simple as reading the basics. I'm not a scientist, but I can read scientific paper, forecast. We did that. So what science shows that the India is the 13th most vulnerable country in the world to climate change. But within the country, the northeastern region are the most vulnerable region. So once we do actually get some scientific research and forecast, we look at how to tell the story. Then we travel and we go to the villages, what the forecast is there, we conversations, we report it from villages, we speak to the villagers, we speak to the old timers there, we speak to scientists operating at the local levels, and we put in the human stories into it. And that's not just northeastern area. So we basically give some down to earth reporters, basically give a human face to the scientific things or the disaster happening there. And for the northeastern things, there is another issue with it. I think the country's by far the best biodiversity area is also northeastern area. And that's a double whammy for the country. So again, we don't just report climate change. So biodiversity also we report. First, for example, the desertification. Desertification, when the India's Atlas came, please all of you refer to that. It's available on the web. It's by Government of India. We were actually scared to look at the desertification happening in northeastern India. We never imagined that this is the region which on face looks green. So down to earth reporter, what they did, they looked at the Atlas, then went back to the people there and reported the story. Then we found that, then we found that why the local villagers are saying that my soil is not having moisture anymore. Actually, so that's the kind of reporting we do. We pick up a scientific things or anything, or we get an alert. Then we go to the villages, we go to the region, we do further research, and we speak to people, which normally any journalist would do, and we put it together. But our story messaging is something, we don't sell it as a local story. It's not a local story, as I told you. Even Sobhapati, when you write for Down to Earth, you always actually are a part of a global story, isn't it? So that is how we approach a story. So a IPCC global scientific report on climate change almost unpackaged at the local level in Churachandpur. That is how Down to Earth actually approaches a story. Get a scientific report, look at the geography, go back to that, speak to people, speak to local scientists, and bring in local experiences and tell the story. So that's how Down to Earth report.
Yeah. Thank you so much. So friends, if you have any questions or clarification you wanted to seek from Richard, I'll give time to you. I mean, but I don't know how long Richard can give this kind of. How much time you can give? That depends on Richard. But if you have any questions, the floor is yours.
Okay, Richard. Here, my name is Prem Chand, and I'm a reporter reporter of local cable TV. So
Yeah.
I just wanted to know that. mm, do you want to say something about corruption and climate change? Because see, when we start joining this media fellowship program on climate change, we start to know the things which are the things uh, which can directly or indirectly affect the climate. For example, when we visit to some far-flung places like some villages in the hill district, they vastly cutting down trees for their household purposes. Even recently, 3 days back, I went to some villages in Kamjong district. So I have seen all the households, they are using, you know, uh, woods for their household purposes. They're keeping huge amount of, cutting down trees in their houses. So when I asked them, don't you get the LPG connections, which was launched by the Prime Minister of India in the year 2016? Uh, I think the name of the scheme is
Ujjwala.
Ujjwala
Ujjwala
scheme.
scheme.
Yeah. But they didn't even know about the scheme at all. So whole the year they're using trees for their household purposes. And when we ask about the children for their family members who they even if they want to have a government job, then at the time of recruitment, the villages or the village chief or the peoples who are residing there, they vastly cutting down trees to sell those trees uh, to join a job so that they can afford a huge amount of money which can be given or which can be give to the authority so that their children be selected for the job. So when we started knowing this, I started thinking about the deep relations between corruption and climate change or all. So if you want to say something about climate change and corruptions and failure of schemes of the government, so can you please highlight about it?
Okay, I think the way you articulated that, that's already the chronology samjhiye kind of, story is already there.
Mm.
But yes, corruptions and environmental degradations are intimately linked. As you pointed out, whether it's Kashmir or anywhere, means it's not just a Manipur issue. But if you look at it, the way you said that the chronology just, you know, there is a program called Ujjwala. Ujjwala is supposed to shift you from fuel to cleaner energy. And why you wanted to shift from the fuel wood? Because you have to cut trees. And why you wanted to stop cutting trees? Because you need forest. And why you needed forest? Because you need the environment. And that's supposed to be happening at the head of India. And if it's corruptions, I think that's where the linkage is. But I must tell you that you thinking about and linking it also, it's a very least talked about issue about the corruption and impact on the environment and particularly natural resources. Whether we talk about the insurgency like anywhere and how the forest have played a role in that, even the Naxalite movement also, if you look at it, how the forestry actually fueled the Naxal movement because the forest department and the laws were responsible for repression and all these things. But at the same time, corruption chipping in and doing away with forest like that popular in 90s, in Kashmir, they said ki one tree, one AK-47. Why you need external help? And everything was chopped off. And many corruption. But I can only say that the corruption and its linkages to environmental degradation and its linkages to overall climate issue is the least reported about thing. we only hear about Africa, but inside India, it's very hardly spoken about. And that's the way you explained it. I think that has a potential to story. Long back, I did a story on it, the illegal, timber trade in Kashmir. Then also I did a story on the Birappan. I think all of you must have heard about his name. Birappan used to be a bandit tusk ivory traders and how he became Birappan actually. So corruption again. But I can only say that yes, it will be good we start telling stories from this perspective.
Next, please. I have a request to the media fellow and the participant just to make short when you ask questions. Next, please.
Hello. Oh, siapa paling?
Agui, your mic, you need to unmute. You need to unmute. We can't hear you. Agui, ta de nang gido unmute to.
Hello, Richard.
Yeah.
It was. I'll just put on my video. It was very interesting hearing you explaining how to do a story on climate change. I was just thinking that whatever you explained to us right now, one thing is that most of the journalists were coming into the environmental sector, reporting on environment and climate change particularly. Most of them are new to this subject. And as you are saying, climate change as a science, difficult for us to understand the basics. So what was I thinking that as a managing one of the functionaries of CSC respondent, you are managing down to earth also. So can your office down to earth, either down to earth or CSC can have a program where young reporters coming into the field of reporting on environment and climate change, you can put in actual practical session on how to do these stories. You have explained in detail how to do a story from the ground. That is very good, I understand. But I'm sure most of our young journalists, the young reporters may not actually grasp into what you are trying to tell. So I think in the future time when this lockdowns are relaxed and all, if you can program where we can have face-to-face interaction, maybe in Nepal, or if you can call us to Delhi.
Yeah. I think I can reply that to.
Sorry to interrupt you, Richard. Before Richard gives the reply, in fact, Tamu Rajesh, we have already have a word with the senior director, Suparno Banerjee of CSC in this regard, and he is happy to organize this kind of thing in the later date once the situation improves. Yes, Richard.
So that's precisely I wanted to inform that at any point of time. And the second, I think to immediately also the CSC resources on climate change, and those can be, I think, shared. And even few of the stories that people are doing, we can also, I think, take up as a kind of mentoring and how to tell stories. Even many of us are here. So those can also be done, how to tell the stories and if any specific things which can be converted into a or to explore the link with climate change. That's always open. I think CSC experts are always there to, take you through. And
Thank you.
personally, I'm always always available to take the story in my magazine as well as and to get back on the things also.
Agui, please. You wanted to ask something.
Yeah.
Agui? Agui Tabro, can you hear me?
Yes.
Agui.
Tabra.
Tabra. Yeah, now you can ask. Yes.
Sir, Because of this environment degrading in my district, Tamenglong, western part of Imphal, bordering Nagaland, there is a Kaziranga corridor. Bengal tiger found and sometimes and come some 10 days back. 2-3 cattle have been killed by suspected this Bengal tiger or tigress. The forest department of Manipur have entered to that spot, spotted out. According to the footprint, it found that it's the mark. They believe that it may be Bengal tigress. So because there is the one factor of environment degrading, and then sir, you have to tell us that say about that preservation of spring water in hills in the mountain area. Now even dry up. This monsoon season, even I'm cultivating my small paddy field. We are facing a lot of scarcity of water. Even in the night time, the farmers running after for this thing water, nah? Just to put in his field much water like that, nah? Standing the portion. This is the crisis now, water crisis. I mean, in the Imphal is most affected in the valley area. Even in the hill area also we have some places, something like cluster rain. Some places it rains and some places not rain. And we 10 days back, we this Northeast Plantain Railway coming up from this Jiribam to Imphal side, some labor also buried inside the mudslide, no? Because caused by the landslide sudden. This is happening because of this degrading. There is the impact, sir. But what as a journalist, how shall we put up for the solution? We are not scientists, we are not environmentalists also, and we are not much expert for this thing. Just we are the media fellowship, enhancing the promulgating the this thing, the awareness, this thing. As a journalist, how shall we put the solution caused by the impact of this environment degradation? Sir, tell me about this thing.
Okay. I think that's very much true. Drying of spring is for the hills, particularly Himalayas, are the first big impact of changing climate and the degradation adding to it. About solution, we journalists are not going to invent solutions. We are looking at stories that might come as a solution. So what are the stories we have to look for? Suppose that you pointed out that springs have dried up. Farmers are not able to get water like earlier. Is there a village where the springs have not dried up? Is there a village where the impact on agriculture has not happened? I think if you get that village, get that solution, means that those communities who have not been impacted, that immediately points to something. So you can look for your solution there by example. The second is that government comes out with lots of, government has many programs for everything. There must be a spring revival program as well. There must be a watershed development program in Manipur. These programs precisely meant to protect this. Might be they have failed spectacularly, but there might be a good example within that, telling that good story why one village when the neighbors have collapsed, but this village is having plenty water, is basically your solution storage. And you need not to do yourself, but searching for those stories. So the basic things happen is that, when everybody knows about the problem, everybody is changing and want to tell a story on the problems, you basically look at the, okay, I am looking for a place where nothing is impacted. I want to know why. That's precisely is the solution story. You must have heard about this Ralegan Siddhi by Anna Hazare ji. And there are many villages. Those are in very drought severe places. For example, in Rajasthan, many villages have not been evacuated despite being inside the desert. When you ask how, that's your solution part. You know, Bangalore, Delhi has faced water scarcity like anything. But there are villages inside desert, they never face water scarcity when it hardly rains. 4 hours a year, altogether time-wise. So you have to actually look at solution from that perspective. We are journalists, so we are looking at stories and examples. So the examples have to be put it that way.
I think we are harmonically. So I'm requesting another fellow for a question.
Hello.
Time is running already.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Oh, sir, I'm Johnson from Chorchanpur. And then during your speech, you have just mentioned that, so to say, you just so to say, frequently mentioned about Chorchanpur. So, sir, during this year, I should say, during this monsoon season, the Chorchanpur town is so to say, facing some sort of very abnormality monsoon, I should say. For example, I just want to take, actually we are facing just like this Shillong type climate, sir. So what will be, so to say, regarding this one, no? So what will be the solution, and then beside that, what will be a suggestion for this this abnormality of this rain?
Okay, abnormality of rain, please.
Yeah.
I'll suggest you one thing first.
Okay.
Refer to the Manipur climate change impact study by the state government. The first account, it's available and there. And look at how this district is going to be impacted by climate change. That study has also been done and very clearly. Now, after that, knowing how it's going to impact, now you look at it, what you are saying that Churachandpur having odd and erratic weather. When you say erratic, we need to define a bit, and that's not science, very difficult. You know, you say that, say, for example, in the 2 months, say it has not rained as much as might be the IMD saying it's raining normal, rainfall is normal, but you say that it's not raining. So it means that you just look at the how many days actually it rained, that for the 2 months rainfall it got it in how many days. That's the first sign of abnormality. Second is that you have the document of the state government's forecast, scientists have done it. So you can tell the story of climate change impact already Churachandpur. As far as I remember, Churachandpur is one of the, within Manipur, it's to be the severely impacted by climate change things. Cross check it. It's if I remember it properly. I might be wrong, but go there. Now look at, come to your part, solution. You know, what would be a solution to a situations where water scarcity is there? Get more water or conserve water. Second, you say that the erratic weather, monsoon coming and going, so your normal cycle has been disrupted. How people have fought in the old time when they used to get less rainfall. You conserve water during the rain and use it in the lean period. It's as simple as that. So the solution is that, you know, like most of the hilly states, we have seen that rainwater, rooftop rainwater harvesting, management of the springs are actually the things that get into come as a solution. So you can do that also. You can speak to your, you know, the old in the villages, the village heads, you know, the gram sabhas, how villages earlier used to do that, bring them out into limelight by saying that this could be the solutions to our erratic, because monsoon will become erratic. There is no stop to it. We cannot do it. So the world has warmed, even if you stop breathing today also, for the next 200 years, everything is disrupted. So the only thing is that how to actually tide over it.
All right. Got it. So I think
Okay,
Johnson.
thank you, sir.
Okay. So one of our friend Rahul is Rahul. He is not a journalist actually. He is working in the Director of Environment. He wanted to ask something. Rahul, please.
Sir, good morning, sir. Sir, my name is Rahul. First of all, thanks for the conversation, sir. My question is quite simple. Actually, I'd like to know about the writing style on climate change. Like, if I got the rainfall data, start from the pre-monsoon to monsoon till winter monsoon, but I am still confused to write the introduction part, the body, and even the conclusion. If you kindly suggest me, I'll be very thankful, sir.
Okay, I think it's very simple actually. For everything, any weather data, we have it. Usually we get this from IMD normal data. What is people do mention to normal rainfall? Then you say that it is above normal, below normal. You know, normal is basically calculated, if you look at it, on the basis of long years, 20, 30 years average, that comes as your normal to your area. And if it's above normal, below normal. You know, when you put this kind of story, how to write about it? We write for what? To communicate, to give away a message. So we must write in simple way so that explaining. For example, just for the sake of an example, I looked at the data of Churachandpur or Manipur for the last 30 years. One IMD or the local weather expert told me, and I raised a question कि sir tell me 30 years में आपका पानी कैसे rainfall में कैसे कैसे क्या क्या बदलाव आया है. He will give you all the data and all these things, but कुल मिला के ये होगा कि out of 30 years, in 20 years there was below normal rainfall. So I have to, as simple as write that, say that for the 60% of the years in the last 30 years, Manipur has not reported a normal monsoon, and it's going down and down and down. That sentence actually is the story. Data later on will just add on to it as an evidence. So job is to demystify. For that you have to understand also many things. As I gave you key, the normal rainfall definition itself is a story. So suppose normal rainfall is 20 years ka. So anything above it also abnormal, anything below is also abnormal. So on face you can demystify saying for 20 years records it has broken one way. The trend, not the record, the trend. So you have to demystify. You have to ask inside the yourself that what I need to know and write it down. And data, just use that data as evidence.
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Johnson, can you hear me? Johnson?
Okay, sir, I can hear you.
Wi-Fi dialect newspaper, please.
Okay, sir. During the meeting, mostly we talk about the what to say, the immediate effect, especially from the local and the village background. But I want to address it this way: how economic the rapid growth in economic impact the climate change, because due to the rapid growth of economic, more family and more individual have the opportunity to get new inventions like vehicles and all these things which could emit carbon dioxide and other harmful gases. So will this be a great impact to climate change? And my problem is, how should we address, how should we make known to the people about this problem?
Okay, I think economic progress is behind the climate change precisely. Your emissions, carbon dioxide emissions and all these things, it's a byproduct of your economic growth. But how to help or to inform people at the local level? Is that as simple as that, for example, what kind of energy people are using it? For example, you might say that fuel wood means use will lead to degradation of forest. Degradation of forest means, the ecological degradations, which will happen. Means aggravate the climate change problem. But before that, the climate has already changed. So people will understand climate change when you tell them how it is impacting their own life. Or you can report actually well, if you can report well, if you understand the impact of climate change on people's life. So I don't.
Earthquake.
Now it's gone.
Yes, yes, earthquake is going on.
Yeah.
Quick comment.
Yeah.
Checking my place
Still
also.
it's checking.
Okay, please go on. Now it stops.
Mild tremble.
A mild one. Okay, so both people, I think I'll just coming back to that, people will understand climate if you tell them from the perspective of impacts climate change is having on their own life. Crop late sowing, erratic monsoon, how impact their life, they will understand it. Similarly, a story of climate change will also from the local area will make wider impact if we tell it from the people's experience perspective. Now coming back to your how to make people understand climate change, again people will understand climate change if you tell them that all these changes are already happening due to climate change. And if you do this, it will add on. And the climate change, please tell that climate change is not something that I keep on, it will impact everybody. Some people might have just the higher capacity to absorb it. Some people might not have, but it's going to impact everybody. So I might be degrading my forest here, but tomorrow that ultimately the change will come back to me in terms of erratic weather and loss of monsoon. So it's sometimes very difficult, but people are experiencing certain things in their own day-to-day life that can be related to climate change. And that's the way people can be informed and larger audience can be also informed through stories.
All right, last question from Jimmy. Jimmy, please, very quick. Time is running out. We don't have time to discuss with the senior editors in the group. Please. Jimmy is from Tamenglong. Jimmy, can you hear me? Jimmy? Okay. There might be some problem. So before going for, requesting Richard for his concluding thing, is there any word from our Joint Director, Damo Brother Kumar, if you have? Before, yeah, please.
Yes, thank you very much, Richard. And it's very immense and it is very interesting talk and experience sharing from your side. And hopefully we can work together more and more in future. And we also planning to have some exposure visit to your that STEAM institution. And it may be from our side, maybe from your side, and we can work together so that we can report from local to global level. It's very, very truthfully you mentioned that you should start from the globally in text and go to the local, and again, message give it to the global level. It's very, very true things. And as you know, the climate change is a global phenomenon. So we should report it to the message to the globally. So hopefully we will work together, and thank you very much. And we'll see you again in some other context. Thank you very much, Richard.
Sure, sir. Sure. Most welcome.
Thank you, Richard.
Thank you very much all. And let's be in touch, I think.
Sure.
Yeah.
We'll work out later.
Okay, thank you.
So now with Richard's presentation and the talk, as part of the program goes, I will request Tamu Arun. Tamu Arun, if you are online, then kindly share your observation, please. Matam se tara makaya del pasida wa. Tamu please. Tamu ito unmute to you. Unmute to the Tamu.
Tàu nó cũng tốt hay tàu ấy đó. Unmute tàu ấy đó.
Ngang le, microphone ngang.
Unmute tàu đấy.
Hello.
Tare.
Okay. No, I don't have much to say. Thanks, Richard, for your enlightening speech, and it has been very educative for us and for our fellows. That's what we have been striving to this Zoom sessions. We are encouraging our young journalists to write and report on climate change, and this session is one of the most effective sessions so far. Thank you, Richard.
Tangfu can say, as he is occupied with some other engagement, Tangfu can say, Tangfu, please.
Yeah, okay. So what do you want me to do?
No, I just need your observation, like the way Richard has said, and what is your observation with our reporters around here, and what we could do? Because most of our reporters out here, are looking for solution kind of thing instead of looking at stories, as they have less knowledge on this kind of issues. So, what you wanted to suggest, what you wanted to give suggestion to the generation based on Richard's talk.
Okay, yeah. So Richard is left, I think. Anyway, I think that was quite
Richard left, yeah.
Yeah, so it was quite a detailed kind of lecture, and I think that's good in the sense that it's told us how the CSE, Center for Science and Environment, as well as the magazine they're bringing out, the Down to Earth, how they work, how the reporters are actually functioning, and how they are able, or at least trying to reconcile what is there in science and what is there in science reporting, because the two are not always the same thing. That you can be actually, because we talk about science, but science is something objective which is happening, and what we know is the interpretation of that object. Sometimes what happens is that interpretation can go wrong, and that has gone wrong on so many occasions. And I can give examples. For example, in instance, during my college days, I was part of a photo club, nature photo club, and we used to go to all the national parks. So in Jim Corbett Park, they had, this is again science, actually a false kind of science. They thought the undergrowth was dying out in the park, so they wanted to bring in some kind of introduce new undergrowth. This was some kind of an exotic lentil brought from Australia. And what happened was, when they brought it in, this thing spread. It's what we call the sambali. It's a variety of sambali. It just spread, and since there is no natural predators and natural ways of checking the growth of this particular plant, the entire jungle got filled. And so when we were actually traveling, seeing the jungle, we had to go on elephants, and the elephants actually had to walk through these thick lentil, thorny, and it scratched the skins and all that. So, and there I heard the talk. I don't know if it has been corrected, if it's been taken out, but it was almost the entire jungle was covered with this, because there is no check. And since there is no check, it just kept on growing and growing until it destroyed the national park. Destroyed in the sense that it was becoming a different kind of a park. It was not the original park. So what I am suggesting here is that we have to be very, very careful about we have to cross-check when there is a scientific recommendation. That also has to be cross-checked, as I said, because it's an interpretation. what's happening there in science, of course, you cannot change it, but the interpretation can change. So the interpretation here too was like that. So there was a false kind of interpretation that the undergrowth had died, so you just try and grow something else. When that thing happened, nothing worked. So that kind of false kind of action can also be very destructive. So we have to be very careful of that. And also, he was talking about the interrelatedness between science and environment, local and global, and all that. Here, I would like to say, what I would like to say is that there is a big connection, but we should not try to reach out too far, because sometimes this will not be understood by the local people. The local people, they can understand it, but they will not be able to relate it to their lives. For instance, if I say that we should not burn firewood because that will melt the polar ice cap, and that is, maybe it's true, in the long run it's true, but it's not going to hit immediately. The local man is not going to say my burning a few logs is going to melt the polar ice cap. Who cares? That's maybe not who cares, but then it's not going to be impacting immediately. So what you have to be looking for are those immediate kind of impacts when we report. And also this follows what we know in journalism as the 5 Ws and 1H, that you have to have the people interested in something that you're writing about. Otherwise, they will not read it. When I can write about the polar ice cap, if I know it, and I report it in the local paper, but that will be read by only very, very few, because that doesn't immediately relate to their lives. Or I can talk about a glacial meltdown in the Himalayas, what we call the third pole. I hope our journalists here will know that there is a concept called the third pole now. We have the first, it's 2 poles, South Pole, North Pole, but the Tibetan Plateau has also a huge reservoir of water in frozen water. And that is why this region, Himalayan region, including the Tibetan Plateau, they have come to be referred to as the third pole. That is also a reserve, it's a huge reserve for water. So, and also, since it is a huge reserve for water, and since people, humans and all life forms have to depend on water, this reserve is also considered very important. And right now, it is also endangered, as we've seen. There is a meltdown there, and it is actually affecting the rivers in India. I mean, most of the rivers not most, but many of the rivers, important rivers, including the Ganga, as well as the 5 rivers in Punjab, they all originate from that area. And also the Brahmaputra, we know, it comes from the Tibetan Plateau, and which is why it is perennial, one reason, that it is rain-fed. In the rainy season, you see the Brahmaputra is spate. But what was happening originally, even when we were children, when we were traveling, we saw that even in summer, or even in winter, in the lean season, monsoon lean season, the river never dries up. And that is because of the glacial feed. The glaciers were melting at a certain rate, and that was actually feeding the river. So the river never dried. In the rainy season, the rains were there. In the lean season, the ice was taking care of that. But now if you go in the lean season, say October, November, you'll find that the Brahmaputra is actually right down at the bottom, just a trickle going on, flowing there. And that is already an indication of the meltdown of the reserve of ice in the third pole diminishing. Either that or somebody's building dams along the way, both of which are happening. The ice meltdown is happening, as well as the dams by the Chinese, especially. They're building a number of dams on the, it's known as the Zangpo River in the Tibetan sector. Until it comes into India, it comes to be known as Dibang and so many different Arunachal Pradesh. We have different names for the river until it comes to the Assam plain, when it comes to be known as the Brahmaputra, and it joins the Gangetic system in Bangladesh and flows down together into the sea. And that is there, but then if we were to talk about these things only, we may not have too many readers here in Manipur. So we have to be linking all this to our local environmental issues. For instance, we are talking about springs, and that is a cascade, that you have one flaw somewhere, and then that flaw is going to be amplified or transferred to other regions. I'll just give you an example. I have been part of this Indo-German project of watershed management, and I was taken as one of the consultants. And here in Manipur, it's for the Eastern Himalayas, but in Manipur, there's a section for Manipur as well. Here in Manipur, they are taking up 3 rivers. One is the Thobal River, and the other one is the Imphal River. The other one, and the third one, the Nambul River. So the Nambul River and the Imphal River basically has to do with the Koglu watershed and the Kaunu watershed. So these places I've been traveling. So you find, for instance, in Kharam Waife in the Singdadam area, they are almost leaving the village because all the springs are drying up. It's not totally drying up, but it's no longer perennial. So in the dry season, they don't have water. So they are actually finding it very difficult. But because of poverty, you are so poor that you don't have any other livelihoods. You have to chop down wood, you have to make charcoal and sell. So that kind of cycle is there. So if you want to break the cycle, we have to be making the intervention in the correct way. As for instance, put some money in the hands of the villagers, give some livelihood, give some source of income. Then they will also take care of the forest, because that forest, the immediate impact is the village itself. And the cascading effect will come downstream. For instance, if the springs there in Kharam Waife dries up, then the Singda Dam is not going to have enough water as well, which will also mean Nambul River is going to be affected. Like that, it goes all the way. So that thing about local and global, I would say local and then regional and then global, it expands that way. But first, I think we have to understand the local effect first, because the local effect is what is immediate, what we understand as our own concern, immediate concerns. So those will be easy to explain to the locals, as well as he will be interested in the actions. If you say you sacrifice so that the polar ice caps are safe, or you sacrifice so that the ocean level remains the same, they will be interested, but in a very academic way. It's not going to be something immediate, something that relates to their life immediately. So I think we have to be successful global journalists, environmental journalists, as well as to be successful in making an intervention in the climate change, fight for climate change, fight to prevent climate change. I think we have to be able to interpret what is there on the table in local terms, how it is going to affect us. Because sometimes what we see is that we see these changes coming in without actually noticing it for a long time. It just happens, and I mean, say after 10 years, you may start noticing a certain bird missing. Birds, for instance, when your children, crows are quite visible in Manipur. In fact, people are guarding there. When you go for a bath in the stream or something, you leave your soap and then bathe, and the crows sometimes or often either playing mischief or whatever, they will carry away the soap. So these crows carrying away soap was there, in fact, in many of our pauros, that our proverbs. The crows stealing your soap. That kind of thing was happening, but we don't see crows anymore in Manipur. Like that, we don't see so many other birds that we used to see when we were children. We don't see so many insects that used to be rampant. We don't see these fireflies anymore. Once upon a time, fireflies were everywhere. At night, if you go to any marshy area, these are full of these fireflies. But now you don't see them anymore. So and you have to realize that something is happening, and that it's not us killing them rampantly, but killing them indirectly, maybe by changing the environment they were in, by changing their habitat. So I think we have to be careful about this. We have to be also, as reporters, we have to be aware of this, not just careful, but aware of this. And then let people, when explaining to people, bring these local issues, then they will understand. In Kharam Waife, for instance, you say, we are going to save the Nambul River, so please don't cut trees. That's not going to affect them directly. But if you say, you try not to cut these trees, we will give you alternate livelihoods, but try not to cut these trees because your springs will dry up. Then that will immediately connect, because that spring is what gives them livelihood as well as their sustenance. And if the springs disappear, they may have to migrate somewhere, which is what they were afraid of. In fact, I went and spoke to many of the people there, that if the springs don't rejuvenate again. They may be forced in years down the line that they may have to migrate elsewhere. So I think we have to be very careful about this. We have to connect to these local issues so that the locals understand it very well. And also, once we have made these connections, then to explain the larger implications of this, that it will have a cascading effect, which will affect the region, which will affect the world, which is why somebody in Germany, the KfW, the German Development Bank, is interested in investing in the Northeast, the Eastern Himalayas. They have no connection there, immediate connection there, but there is a larger connection. Climate change is global, as you were saying. So when you come to that plane, first you get over your immediate problems, and then you start thinking, because when your local problems are taken care of, then you can start thinking of the global problems. We can't be starting the other way around. We can't start saying that the oceans the levels are rising, so we have to sacrifice here. So we have to turn it around and say that we are doing this. Ultimately, it will also save the ocean, but it will save us first, because otherwise we are the ones who are going to suffer the most by certain things happening in our midst. If we manage to control that, we enhance our lives. We make our living easier. But in doing that, we are also helping the climate change fight. I think we have to make this connection. Otherwise, in terms of reporting, it is important because people will be able to understand what we are writing if you do that. And also the fight will become personal if you make it something which is immediate. I think this is where we have to concentrate our focus on, that we have to make our fight very, very personal, in a sense that I'm first saving myself, and in saving myself, I'm also saving others. If we come to understand that, then I think the fight will be a common kind of fight. Otherwise, we're not fighting on somebody else's behalf. If somebody is giving me money, so I'm doing it. It's not like that. I am doing this because I'm saving myself, and in saving myself, I'm saving the others as well, the rest of the world, my immediate neighbors, then the people downstream, then the region, then the state, then the country, then the globe. I think it has to work that way. We have to start from what is immediate for us. Thank you. Let me just say these few words.
Yeah, thank you so much, Samo. And time is really running out. And now, last expert observation is Tamu Rajesh, please. Tamu, are you there? Tamu Tabi, bro. Really research kata tahu kami madu Manipur itu ngang asal. Or Tamu. Okay. Tamu Rajesh kena tahu mana mai kena tahu berah. Aduh, Tamu Rajesh lakti kemar kita. I'll request Tamu Brother Kumar to say a few observations.
More running aside observation thumb ki dabdu confused level male Richard tang higher talk male tamurungi observation thumb grabjan.
I do something he was somewhat of you wanted away. Around the any having English legacy quite a tapir for the Miagani or you can do it. A tupunga sigo opportunity manning the white dialogue.
Tamon talk of Zala. Rajesu Lakramaniko.
Line the later, like the my animal videos.
Okay, the something like it. Again, good morning again to my Senate colleague and my friends. In fact, I'm not the journalist, but I must becoming interesting more and more day by day after working with you people. I tasing na journalist wala kadu translation kalro kanda ko. Gamna nungai we am interesting we bamang ngasai disana haram badai you strike the wahem hai tare. Then climate change, we are trying to have a report on the climate change. In fact, the what of climate change is become as a global scenario. And then global lagi hobama compulsory to know something about the scenario of the global, what exactly happening in the climate change. See, I'm basic border area adu khatang we should understand aina mongoi fully learning digest of so understand about kitang to ma sange then bring the information basic information of the climate change and come down to the local context adu gido akhona local context puthara kana then after knowing and justification and investigation of the local context we should try to bring up again to the global level as a appeal or as a message. See, my gam fazaba ma performance gi am kapsiko. The global lagi local kumdrak pa local lagu message when puklak batakta. Adana climate science should be based on the global phenomenon only. It's not necessarily it is not kahitare local context na climate change gi science to be the yaroi, but it is the very good input for a climate science. Input amadu ibe kuigi. Aduga mamuna kuigi kanodi global gi kanodi oinaba it will take some more time. I did long tenure ama no less than 30 years gi tenure ama kun state over kale rakparina haibini no ko. Aina sida ai kuigi han ba aina nganang degi sum khan bada in strike to work mum college where the first generation to have the experience of the climate change. I see the first generation area of climate change gi experience fanguse. Again, we the first generation to solve it also. Ekoi the thengnariba yam aruba context ama climate change gi context se yam climate issues ekoi ham thengnare amadi akoni solve to godoi neba. We are the only generation. Means like then globally ekoi gi human beings mut kibigi sine ekoi the laiba challenges sama haitare ekoi. Aduna ekoi ngasai work say Hanatom walk the Yamna Hen Tobum Sang Hana Habitat. Say, for example, climate change this raising of the temperature and raising of temperature represent so many phenomena change now, and especially to the rainfall pattern. Rainfall pattern the Yamkan impact where polar animatagi Yam solve changes lap the wind direction change to Obama the wind cycle change over the rainfall Yam sound impact later. Sigi home city of basic knowledge at the cam degree cam haigalai cam haigalate having that much science to the Samudra so by Kangbdiam Kane Dubu six days they the Mukide or Zaptok de Aduga. Say for example, a quick Nasimaki that a quickie labor Zundigi Hobo monsoon period say Manipur 62% deficits at music. 62% of the total rainfall is deficit in Manipur. Say normal da from top of Sangsi 731 millimeter Pangada Banepui. Hosipogasi powder, Jun Tangamadi Nangasi powder Pangadabuzi, 731 millimeter Pangadabu, only 280 millimeter of Pangala as a whole Manipur state. There is 62% deficit. Adana monsoon is September, June, July, August, September. Like coming 1.5 months, 62% pick up the woman with have the question. That's all. This is one salience. So me Handak Sahidang or Binati Mang side is okay around 74% is deficit at Manipur. Then Handak Su see monsoons the around 70% is the deficit lagadi Hoigi Karai the Hoigi context the Hoigi Manipur water scarcity song like can have seen so salience of other take that point to write a story. Because I couldn't have already given that the issue of the water resources. See the rainfall deficit labor, see among the last 5 years, for the Sigi Mam, district wise, you can get it from the all information from our side, our department itself. So, for example, 78% is in Swansanpur is the highest. Swansanpur 78% is deficit salini, must highest name. Of course, only Impal West Katane with the positive when ladies for the Bishnupur, Hobal or negative. Minus if you work on the district level also, just you take that not means this point, you are already in deficiting. Other want more impact agriculture or any, then you can collect some story on the agricultural. How July end agriculture successfully area mayam like this is one of the story. I walk on the Swani story in a country walk on the Sumba and Osinja. Aina hygienic observation to the media fellow recipients, and luckily today some new friends also join who will be able to chance to get in recipient in the future. And very much in the meantime, I would like to just congratulate to that Sabhavati especially to organize such type of interaction amongst the existing fellow recipients and the new media friends, so that we can have two interfaces. One is the existing one and one is the forthcoming one. So this is the two interfaces. So it is very thankful to Sabhavati for this kind of arrangement. Especially what thinking from our department side, what we are supposed to we assume is that that you, the people or media persons, should not think for the solution first. Solution ki hana khanbi ki nobuko. Say climate change akoi nongam sudre karina solution hoigani. Say akoi agriculture yade, what is the solution? Solution may come out by experts or by technicians. Technocrat na tagna experts in the solution ni pujra pe abuko. But our first work is to inform. Information and peace abuko. What exactly happening in the local context? How you have the information? Let's try to disseminate the informations. Akoi kisi information hani yong no khona basine ba igi khwadi pami dise samna denga sigi interaction sigi laura kanda mayamna fellow recipients singna ibirapa kando users start to think for the August reporting. Housing ngasi August ki reporting khan ba hoya reba. Don't think for the July again now. As kai July how the letters ki akoi aduma thado khraje ko August ki akoi khan ba hoya ngasa di ngam ngasai risa ngam mi mayam chindu Location Bureau, equity expert Hansing the Location Bureau, then equine high observation Tambirakanda, think for the August story Quakan Bahorasi, then adaptation see the mostly story Sagapong Amring see traditional knowledge Gikarigi, Kayuna Aquina reporting to Bukanda in a yam basic Igi, journalist Natrana Tonjang, but Anika Poinamanik in Natamkanda. Say success story ga impact Anis and Yaman English first Igi lens. Aina my journalist of first lens site lens whether is it a success story or whether is the impact la success story anishi punsan of the one token in Kale Aham story the if it is a success story and how far is success the success story whether is it blending with the traditional knowledge or or modern knowledge la success story or is it directly linked to the climate issues, climate action, the issue my second story. This is one of the observation and then impact, see how much is impacted. Say for example, landslide in Hill District or say flood in Valley District. This is how much impact can impact where equality. This is also one information. Justify the impact is really linked to the climate change or not. Say landslide talk about lambi yadan action talk it is not linked to the climate change again. Sunga very big example to Hanjan. Aduna high story and is combined last concluding foreign of Honabakanda. I know Hanjaning three pillars though one is the climate action, how your story is linked to the climate action. Climate action camp linked to get the say action Yawibu Hagara, Yaudu Hagara government, then government see. Climate government, government, climate action government, the camp, that's the way to then is it really reflect to the policy or not? Or is required for the policy or not? I'm not saying about whom say, ID action plan, governance, then policy, whom sigi linkage crowd the legi have a sumusu, I Kaitare Mashimiam closely hanging by Tarequida. Aduna Masagi Laiba report to media fencing now. Laiba basic knowledge in the Pusan Birakanda Yamju complicate and log the work with Aduga some chamba messages some of the Yam Chamba Amadagi Lokolaga Idum Sakpa Yabrain Kali Maruna say Aujidi agriculture post the Yankan effect of Honbi Yabrain Kali Adagi say reverse ski. Kangakpagi, Adiga Hosi Flow Lapakan, the Karamina, how they enjoy the people's my story on local Puyabrin Kale. Aduga, Yamtoine He Hangba, Quigi, Kanogi, electronic media singi, Supreme Sanjam Tona Hamba in a session to Honja, Jangan Hanjum Kanbada. Sumba story Shimatang the Pena online the Karida, Quigi experts singing that local canosingi, departmental people sing over video clip, some Salaruga compiled to be a boom labra, do so a still with Sarupudi. Adumba, Apagi minute among Gimba, Adum Tobraga, Pop the happening, and tends to happen now. ꯌꯥꯕ꯭ꯔꯥ ꯍꯥꯏꯅ ꯑꯩ ꯄꯨꯔꯥ ꯁ꯭ꯇꯤꯜꯃꯛꯇꯤ ꯇꯧꯍꯟꯖꯅꯤꯡꯗꯦ ꯑꯗꯣ ꯑꯗꯨꯒꯨꯝꯕꯗ ꯈꯤꯇꯪ ꯆꯪꯁꯤꯟꯁꯤꯔꯥ ꯐꯤꯜꯒꯤ ꯀꯩꯅꯣꯃ ꯌꯥꯎꯗ꯭ꯔꯒꯁꯨ ꯑꯗꯨꯁꯨ ꯑꯩ ꯈꯤꯇꯪ ꯌꯦꯡꯍꯟꯖꯅꯤꯡꯉꯦ ꯑꯗꯨꯒ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯌꯥꯝ ꯑꯦꯛꯁꯄꯦꯛ ꯇꯧꯖꯩ ꯀꯔꯤꯒꯤꯅꯣꯗ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯂꯩꯔꯤꯕ ꯁꯤꯒꯤ ꯔꯤꯄꯣꯔꯠꯁꯤꯅ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯒꯚꯔꯟꯃꯦꯟꯠꯀꯤ ꯑꯣꯏꯕ ꯄꯣꯂꯤꯁꯤ ꯑꯃ ꯑꯦꯛꯁꯟ ꯄ꯭ꯂꯥꯟ ꯑꯃ ꯗꯦꯚꯂꯞ ꯇꯧꯅꯕ ꯉꯁꯥꯏꯒꯤ ꯔꯤꯆꯥꯔꯖ ꯄꯜꯂꯝꯕꯗꯣ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯁ꯭ꯇꯦꯠ ꯑꯦꯛꯁꯟ ꯄ꯭ꯂꯥꯟ ꯑꯝꯇ ꯍꯥꯏꯔꯝꯃꯤꯗो ꯏꯠꯁ ꯅꯥꯎ ꯒꯣꯏꯡ ꯐꯣꯔ ꯔꯤꯚꯤꯖꯟ ꯄꯥꯔꯠꯅꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯁꯨ ꯂꯩꯔꯤꯁꯦ ꯁ꯭ꯇꯦꯠ ꯑꯦꯛꯁꯟ ꯄ꯭ꯂꯥꯟꯁꯤꯒꯤ ꯔꯤꯚꯤꯖꯟꯁꯤꯒꯤ ꯐꯥꯏꯅꯦꯂꯥꯏꯖ ꯍꯟꯗꯛ ꯊꯥꯁꯤ ꯇꯧꯗꯣꯏꯅꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯖꯨꯂꯥꯏꯁꯤꯗ ꯀꯝꯄꯜꯁꯔꯤ ꯑꯗꯨꯝ ꯑꯗꯨꯅ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏ ꯃꯌꯥꯝꯒꯤ ꯏꯔꯩꯕꯁꯤꯡꯗꯣ ꯑꯁꯤꯅ ꯁꯣꯂꯨꯁꯟꯒꯤ ꯄꯥꯔꯠ ꯑꯃ ꯑꯣꯏꯗꯣꯏꯅꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯗ ꯄꯣꯂꯤꯁꯤ ꯗꯣꯀꯨꯃꯦꯟ ꯑꯣꯏꯅ ꯁꯤꯖꯤꯟꯅꯗꯣꯏꯅꯤ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯗꯤ ꯃꯌꯥꯝꯅ ꯏꯔꯩꯕ ꯔꯤꯄꯣꯔꯠꯁꯤꯡꯗꯣ ꯁꯣ ꯇꯦꯛ ꯚꯦꯔꯤ ꯁꯦꯔꯤꯌꯁ ꯑꯣꯟ ꯗꯦꯠ ꯏꯁꯨ ꯑꯦꯟ ꯑꯩꯈꯣꯏꯒꯤ ꯌꯥꯝꯅ ꯀꯟꯀ꯭ꯔꯤꯠ ꯑꯣꯏꯕ session PBU aduga maruenju again I am requesting your people that you please go through that our stand action plan on climate change. It is online itself, otherwise we can share you personally also the masi important over document money. Please try to rectify on that also. Thank you all. Thank you very much. Swavati.
Thank you so much. One of our friends from Chinapati wanted to ask one question. Samuel, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Samuel is writing for Hornbill Express in Chinapati, as well as he writes for People's Chronicle and Shanghai. Yes, please.
Please.
Hello.
Yes, we can hear you.
Actually, masise asimak tabu haina haibusnate adubu aina hainingba amadi hojiki
on your video please. Mayam na sukra uningba adunone video so on to biro audio so on to biro
aigi amuk
oi yare adu ngambiro nataga audio so unmute to biro
development se lakpagi mayam se leirega hojik akhoi leiriba iron factory Satyam industry haina snapti gi ada 9MR gi makhada leiriba Satyam industry masi gise mi mayam nadi asigi manakta leiriba mi mayam se horen asidigi maikhu thura iba mutisina mi mayam da shokadra habigi kinaba mi painaba amase adum mayam da sumaina le adegi every right thinking citizen se masigi worst impact is minus soidana lakani have me mayamna do mina khangaga le adu do hojiki different instances hojik thuraiba thodok masisi haige haragana moigi industry dugi kri makhoigi isinga kri adu mina turen du da haijin bada turen da leiba ngane hojiki crab ne masisi leiba ngamdana adu mina mapanda adu mina thurakpa masise thodok sigumbagi thodok se mayam mi mayam se ure ado hojiki leiriba hojik turen snapti gi turen se adu makharum degi adum tarakpada ekoi snapti da bazar da leiriba turen sina ekoi mi mayam chaba yaningai gi ising oina adu maina on haningai gi damakta haina turen se semo semdok se adumana nanna laise haina kanna adumana ekogi district administration ne ekogi hanna DC puramba jasinta lazra sasu snapti river se kanna adumana semdo aga kri toilet ki kri sigumba se adumana turend happy gnu haina adumana mi mayam se ekogi SD sa gi volunteers sing mayam ga yauna lothokiba masi sumaina le ado sigi
question no Samuel stop the tawre ko question do kai no to tapiro
Satyam industry ki masi se kamaina tawgudabano ai thanta ana reporting tawge haraga chu masi se moi gi overground gi mile underground gi mile sumaina leibada ai thanta sigi matang da reporting to haina khana gumbasu adu suggest to busu le adubu masi se hayeng aina report tawra kanda aingon debu adu maina mina sokadabusu legadra natragana kamaina masise ai kamaina risk lobuna bo adu maina phagadra haiba amtang hangning ba malai
masi tawo ma khumbi tawra just tabi bano tawo just later Now, what the create to meaning, but now what the Hapitang magi sida hapit observation now legi to hapitang hadi again no regarding Satyam industry na mo youth ki iron bars how kamu ma to gamoina environment degrade to river model hai be matang si report to kan na mangun thing na challenges to kari to company mo have you say
Hi, I'm gonna have or river contamination thanks.
the ma report to the magi challenges ki magi no khad dei hai kai to ya
The sea report over Harry, my set norms, my license low consider one of my agreement to the and if it's man of terms man the break or the report away I don't contamination later. Agreement to the Shokina reverse contaminator I consider this global issue when like contaminator ideas. The other terms in the whole of you, Kerala Hawaii. Water table Coca-Cola factory company water table handle and in case of terms if it is even if it is in the agreement see contaminant not is it had sky in Haramasu boy in a man hierarchy only a is I had it passage going to see we approach any amana my terms and conditions my factory set up as a money to we are see rules have to quite hag rules where I mean law manner so the report can be either like that or not without agreement the yowler may have on CCI and Herman Yarazu may have said see another see Miami public interest in a report over the sky I had example in began a tiny Coca-Cola case competition period okay water table handle by open day others who seasonally come with the village of we will talk to will talk and say hen and talk there away from la issue from the or the gonna say groundwater from the Silla the may have press or actions laws and change or right away more post of
Okay, thank you. Now, Tamara is the Tamara for the Tambili Buki, Duna Magi, Spectuna, Tamara, Tamara is the community as we had a when they while doing the environmental made it. The Samuel City issue city community as Ukara and a close link level in a Tamara is keep more to happy type.
My what is Karigumba Aina newspaper Magi Egan Kandana Kalamagadi, a prosperity. In Mamang the Skumba story correctly, the journalist as a journalist activist and he put the Lagata over there, he made it. Pasta, my case, I handle the water good. So the man Harry was common villager, I the Tari, common villager singing story correct. I had a prosperity. Near the when ishing factory the tolerable amotpa Traganama arsenic over pot man tolicolido, command showing a collido and worried or a story and you file torani. Young Kai Hena cannot do the Hana factory to the effect of the video. At the surrounding area do the groundwater the command or the village the Maggie ishing palak of the Linatina talk report reporting torani. I phone published report to give basis to I know amount of related civil society organization approach story. We report ground the villagers in the Smina handle the woman. And the civil society group concerned with Ukraine auction be the issue larger dimension the junction bureau and higher. Higher can the psychic common villager and complaint or poto concern environmental and social NGO Moina Ketang Kanam hierarchy story though I know file tore. Adugi second story file tori though Adugi basis the I related government department approach story. I the Sumba ground the Swiner report Tole Kole others winner impact mayam lere local villages sing si kamai tok sige and government level the masi handle to view having approach ama aduna government na concerned department na I suppose Manipur Pollution Control Board irone makoi na sanction laga handle to raga di yam phare ai gumba to rutra di masida koi na journalist come activist oigi pandam da kana singche local body sing jamu kari haini issues de da kra kan yauksalang na ba double role tawre haitare koina just report awna ta issues report awada impact narrative degi arigi government concern government department su responsibility se lor tabdegi concern maruina local CEOs of singte mobilize on honor ko ado honor ko da ai reporting se villager gi impact to wari ko plus magi hojiki lariba factory du na man piribi impact to and I work I did me expert amani tanara kanda cam arsenic oil di my disaster na direct to the post result ko le ka adum khara akan ba wari se matang mamang dai na case am to gi kanda khara queen changi I almost 1 week reporting hai tare story je makan adada masi masagi kenogi context la phai tare tamra dim sare de sai mamangi research na hybrid yawi adi local impact la du ga magi large kanoda government level hai tare de adi factory to idena tawu kan da magi environmental clearance low hibra adi magi term and condition me ama lai hibra adu ballet to kopra adi detail ba su mayo no tare adada ngasai kanana GMs na mana panbada external influence moina report awada kitang mayo na bada waga da ba mana underground non yam palli to adugi influence lai hai bigi pressure mapani pressure lai haidana adugi damakta ni aina report awgi da strangon da su same face to wi ai external pressure yam kan irakanu kana ngonda direct harak play aduna ni just reporting tawaga plus as an activist ama waina koi bigi responsible lobo ngamba krakan ba civil society organization ko mobilize organda ai report the base organda masi issue she resolve to view the pressure sagat pam changi
Okay. Highly kenogi direct target to the even at with the surrounding the effect of me am the hana slowly even to the gala have the tapi don't tapi
ya to wi de ke laina tina hengal pra sing pasalak ta bra ada mamang tu chahi 15 years mukti mama orangani chorjapur da su groundwater ma'am acidic or pegi arsenic content or pegi ami gwar kum dharu da pankar kotar ko ma'am wari lagi ado just kano khara I raga top ni yadi hai tare ai gi mota
okay
raga different level da ID masi strategy tongan yam lay hai tare ID
ayamadi loishala aduga matam su
sorting kenota
keno mogi ring tamoi to haibiro aduga last ki uski tamenglong gi ring ba manama se moi gan fuel ma asai de question ma hangjegi am hangjegi hai
mahan brother
oh adu mai se hangalaga tamoi duna do simbi be yara ga yam moi jin tamoi di wala mo ni sai ki keno to ring bam please ring bam tabra
hello.
Tai.
Okay.
Yang pasang sambil ni please.
Okay. Matam pangal ra haida kara to khagadi khallam mane to I really thank the organizer and the participants, fellow media staff, officials. My question is our awareness on climate change through print media or television or any sort of media, but this kind of awareness could not be reached to the interior village or where the forests are covered with we need to be preserved for
Start directing about question though.
even
Makunji
even my parents they're still practicing this Zoom cultivation, where cutting down the forest every year. So I couldn't just ask them to stop because this is a livelihood issue.
Okay.
So my question is there anything that we could do or like alternatives to cultivation from government or from NGO, like if we cannot stop ask them to stop it because it's a question of right to life issue. So if we are to stop this Zoom cultivation or reduce the rate of illegal selling of timber and all, I think we need to give some alternative source for the people who are doing this. So that's yeah.
I don't know what you're about.
Yeah.
Okay. Alternative to kind of have neighbor Zoom cultivation neighbor. Generally, I am not in another level. The sugar if you have the color. React to winning the lady, react to Google in the community previous.
As a journalist, we are just reporting the situation on the ground. I think how to deal with the problem is a strategy to be adopted by government department, environment department, forest department. So we have to differentiate between these two. As a journalist, we are just reporting what is happening on ground. What are the problems and what are the deficiency, whatever there is there. Our role is limited to that as a journalist. So what you are talking about, livelihood, that should come into the state strategy action plan. So I think that will be for better.
Sagi kenodo senapati hangkibido Samuel ang padi tamelong zumgi ay overall ay information ang pining ba dun na ay direct answer mak natragas ko hoy climate change ga related oiba oidaba as a journalist every issue khangum khagadi loi khangum thobne duna ai khoina concentration je only climate change pibna sum dogi hendok to pen khanbani but Zuki industry lakpagi issue adagi turenda pollution or issue there's lots of factor mayam lei khoi leiba turen polluted or say haziki still industry na imphal liba the oil impact to the gidi sen mining no hen bazina more yam ken grai da ko the impact is very much adagi akogi Manipur da leiba turen khudimak Thobal turen imphal turen leiba turen anamba hairok turen anambasi due to the sand mining digi degrade to bigi sang yang wang ya khoda suko sand mining means not only sand pebble mining and illegal mining sing see one of the factor but it is not directly linked to the climate change. Of course from socio-economic angle it may link to that again. So akhoi namna socio-economic link tagi upai thabuk suban leitabagi badra mining tarpa that link again to the climate refugee gumba adong the link to wari moikre but the impact of the science akhoi science lon pusalagadi is not directly linked to the climate change. But if you look to the originality of the life of the river adogadi mus link puslev ko adra aina haining musi floodplain zone economic lay Manipur gi. See, you must know about that. Floodplain zone. See, Makhad labor area da industry to it is very much illegal. Maybe polluted or non-polluted. See, you see, okay, Mashida, okay, focus taroga, okay, Hajiki, Senapati, still ki highway or any related any industry okay highway floodplain gi isma highway. Then another information is that Honorable NGT National Green Tribunal na National Green Tribunal it is very much concentrated towards the environmental issues, developmental issues. They are working on the development and the environment. And is contradicting development the environmental issue, environmental issue always conflict with the developmental issues. Other solution mostly down to one tourism. Exactly, so we should think on that. We cannot stop the developmental process. But we should constantly try to manage the environment also. See the best solution is complete solution. Aduna sagi district environment plan same way na honorable NGT na yam to in hiking honorable NGT do they understand that the development cannot stop it. Aduna how to find out the solution thina na bohana bada National Green Tribunal na akan direction karina pige the district should have district environment plan. Every district the environment plan lege the have environment plans sagi where to be located the industry, cry the industry where to be in mine, cry the mining the winnie. Adegi Magi Lady district to go Magi sketch some environmental management set up the leg of the Benimco, Machines would district Luibungam. See, you can pressure from that angle. Adul once later the Alice state key over action number plan then Madu Sumnasati have the social auditing to we have environmental auditing to we have environmental auditing the social auditing to frameworks late where to be set up. Hosiki industry rule industry set up the thing we are cried that what they have the government people location area to go to Nebuco. Adana high river Anisi zoning allows for the industrial site. It should be very much set up by the state government. High river industry setting ama I set up ama kai zoning. What they have in the same way. Say, for example, when preparation of the district environment plan in Ukul district mining until but I have seen lots of mining over there in Ukul district. See, assume corrections in a palm. Take this note. ID Sigi directions. See, sometimes please go through that honorable NGT's directions, or we can interact. You please visit to my office, then I can help to you find out the directions. Sig directions I think nobody will blame on that. And finally, regarding the Tamilong friend Zumgi Matang Damusu, by increasing the population, zooming issues minimized to is parallel by increasing the population, zooming also increasing day by day. But we alternatives can be alternative but we can modernize it. We can modernize shifting. Labor practice to modernize the traditional knowledge, traditional practice never zooms but traditional knowledge Madu Pukala scientific knowledge and blend organ, modernized or such. Aduna say I am to Hijabani, friend we should have a village mapping first. Village maps compulsory zoom to area village mapping where to be zoom, where to be settled, where to be your water reserves or water conservation point. I'm saying the village mapping is a compulsory like the village ownership to Hanse village village king the village head key ownership to Lakanda. You just start from your end first. Don't wait for the government implementation, government intervention. Government intervention kona khan se ko adu as a civilian adu mahana village ki mapping ji horaba adu zoom ji kai tawani adu how to modernize it have madu ai adumai to hojin adu sagi honorable NGT ki posa it is very strong tool for you peoples to investigate a report. Sika haige to thank you very much. Thank you. Yes, over to Subhavati. Swati unmute mute out. Swati mute out.
Sorry. Thank you everyone. I was concluding the matter now. I could be find it. Now we have only 19 members in the discussion. To Ringbam is we have a question on Samuel Yaubi. Jimmy was a question of Richard Matanga. Okay, thank you, Samuel. Although Jimmy Schumacher Richard Cowan, the founder Gabriel can when a limited khar le na matam le accommodate to ho ngam do gi ni madu waro bino aduna personally ai magi number kuma if ko members in kana gumba ma gonda ngasai hang do ba khangning le re ga di ai magi number do thabiro ai share ta kano koi tongan hang je ga di no number do thajar ke ko particular question le ga di adu ko loin moi na su tongana program gumba kari gumba first select ka do male already moi hana wari saw le kan na ko na smile to we ko si to kan moi am proud na ino to gi aduna nuai jare ngasi gi oina ko gi matam ni khar sang lo le waro bi ya di khai participants hana le ba ko gi 13 14 aduga expert member ga hardly to 15 16 member or ngasi di nearly 30 ne participate to 29 how they actively participate to me ji powder ji ko in participate to ne kun gum ne ko na yam wai je maina siguma initiative mo ko gi media working group on climate change na ga related environment na type to ga maina sinje basi aduna ngasi gi ko gi research na tv gi ma gi talk to the kai gum kitang kana bal le ga di madu gi mating global locally global bukat pa na mana kan hai di local reporter or su globally global reporter we ni we bi abagi magi adugi line da paudo ibina bu khopina ba aduga solution provider oina salaga su sagi solution do solution oina kena to budi na daga su mana koi reporting the public informed over firstly informed over kari thoin ko kan na tong gi mana piram budu gi mayam gi keno ma koi idea do do gi lobi ramadan khale da nuai je ngasi koi gi Jiribam all India radio gi Jiribam gi koi video correspondent koi maru adigi all mase Jiribam koi working journalist keno gi su advisor review ngatem bi su de masai ho budu tung si pau yaw bi yaw ngai je ado ko matung da ko na sijar ko zum yaw bi